Good evening, and welcome to Sleep Journeys. Tonight, we step into the heart of Athens, but not the Agora or the Pnyx. Instead, we enter a place where generals forget discipline, politicians forget dignity, and orators forget moderation. The ancient Greek pleasure house. From morning preparations to the late-night wreckage of cushions, lamps, and far too much wine, you were walking the sandals of the man who runs it all, a host, a juggler of egos, a weary conductor of laughter, song, and scandal. If you enjoy these journeys through history's stranger corners, leave a like and tell us in the comments where in the world you're listening from tonight. Now settle in, let the lamps be lit, and let the night unfold. You wake not to birdsong, nor to the sweet chiming of temple bells, but to the unmistakable sound of someone knocking over an amphora in the courtyard. A hollow crash, a splash, then a shriek as one of your attendants wails that the wine is ruined. Not even dawn yet, and already Dionysus has claimed his first sacrifice of the day. This, you remind yourself, is what it means to run a pleasure house in Athens. It is less about philosophy or politics, and more about logistics. Wine that flows, lamps that stay lit, musicians who don't sulk, and clients who leave convinced they've had the evening of their lives, even if all you gave them was watered wine and a fig cut into quarters. You rise, pulling on a tunic, still faintly scented with last night's incense. The wall scratches at your shoulders, but you've no time to find a softer one. The floors beneath your feet are sticky, the residue of spilled honey and wine mingled with olive oil from lamps carried too carelessly. You'll have it scrubbed before guests arrive again tonight, though you know well enough, but within hours it will be just as sticky again. Your house is less a place of purity than a theatre of chaos, and you, the stage manager. You step into the courtyard. Already, two attendants are arguing. One insists that the broken amphora is not his fault, that the cat knocked it over. The other swears the cat has more sense than both of them put together, and that the first man has simply had too much of last night's leftovers. You sigh. In Athens, men debate in the Agora, but in your house, they do it over shards of pottery and puddles of wasted wine. The air is heavy with smells from last night. Smoke still clings from braziers, bitter and resinous. A tray of fish bones left out gives off a sharp tang, somewhere between brine and rot. Sweetness lingers from figs split open and forgotten, their syrup congealed in the heat. It is less the scent of decadence, more the odor of what decadence leaves behind. You rave for the attendants to clean, though you know it is a race against time. Scrub one mess, another appears. As you inspect the rooms, you see what tasks the day holds. Cushions are strewn everywhere, some stained with wine, some with oil, all needing beating back into shape. Lamps lean at odd angles, their clay soot-stained. A lyre lies abandoned on a couch. Two strings snapped. Its owner vanished hours ago in a haze of wine. Someone, you suspect the young philosopher who insisted form is everything, has left half a scroll of notes under the table, stained with garum sauce. Your role is not simply to clean, but to prepare. Tonight is no ordinary night. Word has reached you that 3 powerful men will attend. One, an orator, fond of hearing his own voice. Another, a general, fond of hearing no one else's. And a third, a wealthy patron, who could fund your house for a year, if only you can keep him supplied with dates and flattering company. It will be, in short, a gathering of men who all believe themselves gods, and you, their poor mortal servant, must play Hermes, ferrying words, wine, and wit between them. You remind yourself of the basics. The couches must be arranged so that no guest feels slighted by his neighbor. The wine must be watered, but not so obviously that anyone notices. The musicians must be bribed not to sulk if ignored, but not so much that they think themselves indispensable. And most importantly, the philosophers must be gently discouraged from debating the true nature of love until at least the second jug of wine, for nothing clears a room faster than a sober lecture. As you walk, you check the storeroom. Amphorae line the wall, their clay bodies cool, their painted letters still legible. You run your hand over one, the surface gritty, the scent of resin sharp. You count them quickly. 12 full, 3 already opened. Enough for tonight, perhaps, though you know well enough, but generals drink as though each cup fuels their campaigns. You make a note to send for more, lest your evening collapse in scandal. For in Athens, a pleasure house without wine is like a trireme without oars, adrift and utterly useless. By mid-morning, servants are busy scrubbing, sweeping, fetching. Their sandals slap against the floor, their muttering constant. The courtyard begins to look less like the aftermath of a siege, and more like a space where men might actually enjoy themselves. The lamps are polished, their bronze fittings glinting. Fresh cushions are beaten, feathers drifting like snow as they are stuffed back into place. Trays are carried in, olives, cheese, honey cakes, figs, carefully guarded this time. A slave boy sneaks a piece of bread, only to be cuffed by the cook, who mutters that if guests find the platters half empty, he'll have both their hides. You watch, directing here, correcting there, and cannot help but smile faintly. It is absurd, this labor, this constant cycle of preparation and ruing, yet it is also power. For tonight, when the lamps are lit and the wine flows, when voices rise in laughter and argument, it will be your house that holds them. You may not speak in the assembly, nor lead troops in battle, but you command a stage where the mighty come to shed their dignity. And that, you think, as you step back into the courtyard, is no small thing. By noon, the sun presses hard against the clay roof tiles, and the house hums with preparation. The air is thick with the smell of oil and smoke, as braziers are coaxed into life for roasting meats. The cook bellows in the courtyard, arms flailing, as he orders boys to grind spices finer, to fetch more honey, to keep the cats away from the skewers. His voice is louder than any orators in the agora, and if generals commanded their troops with such vigor, Sparta might have fled years ago. Inside, the true heart of the evening stirs. The women, your house's finest assets, recline lazily on couches, as though the work ahead were nothing more than stretching one's arms. They laugh, combing their hair, sprinkling themselves with oil that smells of myrrh and cinnamon. To any guest, their languor will seem effortless, but you know better. They are professionals. They save their sharpest wit, their keenest smiles, for the hour when the lamps are lit and the wine flows. One of them, Callista, calls across the room, asking if you finally repaired the broken couch leg. Last night, she declares, a merchant nearly tipped sideways during the toast. I had to steady him with more grace than Hera herself. You nod grimly. A crooked couch in your business is more than an inconvenience. It is a diplomatic disaster. For if a patron feels mocked by furniture, you may lose his coin before the first amphora is drained. The musicians arrive next, 2 lyre players and a flute girl, their instruments tucked under their arms like sullen children. They demand coin before they play a note, reminding you of last week when a general threw olives at them for missing a beat. You hand them extra drachma, cheaper than another scene, and remind them not to begin with funeral dirges as they did last time. In a pleasure house, even music must flatter pride. Yet no amount of music or figs will distract from the true performance. Tonight's gathering is not about olives, more about politics, though politics will be loudly shouted between cups. It is about the unspoken expectation that these men, generals, orators, patrons, will be made to feel like kings of Olympus. They will eat, they will drink, and they will be entertained in every sense of the word. Your task is not to provide joy yourself, but to orchestrate it. The women will laugh at jokes that aren't funny, nod at boasts that aren't true, and pretend that an author's stories about tax reforms are as gripping as Homer. Their eyes will sparkle, their hands will linger, and the illusion of divine indulgence will settle over the room. By the end, the men will believe they have conquered not only Athens, but pleasure itself, while you, behind the scenes, count the coins and sweep the falls. The preparations continue. Oil lamps are trimmed, their wicks tested, their clay bodies polished until they gleam. Cushions are rearranged in circles, for no man of rank must ever sit in shadow or too far from the wine jar. You personally inspect the storeroom, amphorae lined like soldiers, some filled with decent Chian wine, others watered down more than the Piraeus harbour. You know well enough when to offer the good stuff, and when to let the illusion of taste do the work. The women tease you as you pass. One asks if you'll finally join the festivities tonight, instead of pacing the courtyard like a worried father. Another laughs that you fuss more than Hera on her wedding day. You grin, but inside you feel the familiar knot of dread. For you know what comes when men of power mix wine, vanity, and indulgence. Rivalries sharpen, boasts clash, and sometimes fists fly faster than lyres can strum. You pause in the courtyard, breathing the smells of roasting goat and garlic. Above, the sky darkens toward evening. Soon they will come, with their sandals polished, their egos inflated, their purses heavy. And you, part innkeeper, part diplomat, part jester, must see them fed, flattered, and sent home, convinced they have tasted something divine. The truth is, the orgies Athens remembers are less about desire, more about theatre. You provide the stage, the chorus, the props. They provide the noise, the drama, the fragile illusion of being gods for a night. And tomorrow, when the sun rises, you will sweep away the crumbs, scrape the wax from the floor, and begin again. By afternoon, the bustle of preparation slows, and you pause to look properly at the house you run. This absurd, costly, endlessly demanding stage for Athenian appetites. If the agora is the beating heart of the city, then your house is the lungs. It inhales wine, gossip, and laughter, and exhales scandal, songs, and the occasional debtor staggering into the streets with one sandal missing. The weather, at least, is merciful. The sky is a clear Attic blue, the sort that poets pretend is unique to Athens, and merchants pretend justifies higher wine prices. A soft breeze filters through the open courtyard, carrying with it the faint salt of the sea and the sharper tang of olive trees from the hills. The heat of noon has passed, leaving the air warm but bearable, perfect for the sort of gathering where cloaks are thrown aside and men lean half reclined, as though their lives depended upon their posture. The inner courtyard lies at the center of everything, open to the sky, its flagstones swept, its corners shaded as though they swayed gently in the breeze, whispering like conspirators. Behind them lie small alcoves and rooms, each more private than the last, where guests can vanish when the noise grows too great or their ambitions too personal. A clever design, this layering of spaces. First the open square, then the curtained alcove, then the door that shuts completely. Privacy in your trade is not a luxury, but a form of currency. Couches are arranged along the walls of the courtyard, each paired with a low table. The couches are worn but soft, their cushions beaten back into shape, their linen covers fresh for the evening. The tables bear trays already laid with dried fruit, cheese, and olives glistening in oil. To the untrained eye, this looks like abundance. To you, it is simply set dressing, a promise that more will follow. At the center lies the pool, shallow, wide, its water fed by a trickling fountain. Small fish dart through its depths, flashing silver in the sunlight, their movements drawing the eyes of bored guests when conversation falters. The fountain itself splashes steadily, its sound soothing, though you recall too well how often it has been anything but. Drunkards wade into it at least once a month, declaring themselves Triton or Poseidon reborn. You still remember the general last season, who tried to give a speech from the middle, only to slip on the tiles and resurface with a broken nose. He left swearing never to return, but of course, he returned within a week. Pride may be wounded, but desire never stays away for long. The air within the courtyard carries its own perfume. Braziers are lit sparingly, their smoke mingling with the scent of myrtle branches placed in vases, fresh enough to mask the less savory traces of last night. From one of the side rooms comes the faint sweetness of incense, sprinkled earlier by the women, part ritual, part practical. After all, no Athenian believes a gathering is complete unless the gods are coaxed with fragrance. Light shifts constantly here. As the sun tilts, shadows play across the curtains, making them ripple like sails. The fountain scatters droplets that catch the light, momentary sparks against the stone. At night, lamps will throw softer patterns, the flames dancing across linen and bronze. You imagine it already, the laughter, the smoke, the silhouettes of raised cups behind curtains, the sounds of song blending with splashing water. Everywhere there is evidence of its double life. By day, the house looks almost respectable. Clean cushions, tidy trays, a courtyard with fish as harmless as any wealthy citizen's villa. But you, who see it both ways, cannot help but notice the scuff marks on the couches, from sandals clumsily kicked off, the faint wine stains that no scrubbing removes, the cushions that sag in suspicious shapes. Even the fountain's fish dart nervously, as though remembering past nights when sandals and limbs disturbed their peace. It is, in short, a house made for two truths. To outsiders, it is a place of beauty and refinement, its courtyard breezy, its curtains elegant, its cool a marvel. To those within, once the sun falls and the lamps are lit, it is a theatre where masks are dropped, reputations are risked, and Athens' finest forget that tomorrow the assembly will expect them sober and serious. You lean against a column, watching the fish dart, listening to the steady splash of the fountain, and allow yourself one satisfied thought. Whatever else tonight may bring, your stage is set. Evening creeps down the streets of Athens, the sky softening from gold to violet, and your house begins its nightly transformation. Where the courtyard had basked in the afternoon's honesty, it now slips into shadows and smoke, a place of suggestion rather than clarity. Servants move quickly with lamps, trimming wicks, filling small clay bowls with oil, and setting them along ledges, in niches, beside couches. Flames catch one by one, little sparks of amber, until the courtyard is a constellation of light. Their glow turns limning curtains into pale veils, rippling as figures pass behind them. The pool in the center mirrors each flame, water rippling with every splash of the fountain, making the reflections dance, as though the very gods have joined the preparations. The cooks grow frantic. Smoke curls up from braziers where skewers of goat meat spit and sizzle, their fat dripping onto coals with a hiss. Garlic and herbs perfume the air, so thick it clings to your tongue even before you taste. Flat loaves are pulled from ovens, their crusts crackling, their insides steaming. The smell of warm grain a comfort against the sharper scents of roasted meat and fish. Honeycakes are arranged on trays, their syrup glistening like molten gold. You know most of these will not survive the first rush of guests. What matters is the illusion of endless plenty. The women gather in the courtyard, no longer languid but alert, their eyes bright in the lamp glow. They adjust jewelry, sprinkle more oil on their skin until it gleams, and rehearse their lines of wit. One practices laughter in different registers, a polite chuckle for a dull politician, a bright giggle for a generous patron, a soft murmur for a poet who insists his verses are misunderstood. Another balances a cup of wine on her palm, insisting she can carry it across the courtyard without spilling a drop. You know well enough she can. She's done so even while dodging the flailing arms of a general 3 cups past dignity. They tease you, as they always do. One declares that you worry more than Athena's owl, watching everything with round eyes and no joy. Another asks if you've hidden away the best wine for yourself again. You grin, reminding them that without your fussing, there would be no lamps, no wine, no cushions, only chaos. They laugh, but they know you're right. The musicians tune their instruments, plucking strings, blowing reeds, striking the skin of a drum with their palms. The sound wobbles at first, uncertain, then steadies into rhythm. Soon, these same notes will be drowned by laughter and boasts, but for now they echo clear beneath the colonnade. You remind them sternly not to begin with hymns to Apollo. Nothing kills a mood faster than a lecture in musical form. You make one final inspection. The couches gleam in lamplight, their cushions plumped and waiting. The pool gurgles softly, its surface alive with fire-lit ripples. Trays of olives, cheese and bread stand ready. Amphorae of wine are positioned at strategic intervals, enough that no guest ever has to ask twice. Even the private rooms are scented with incense, their curtains tied neatly, as though to promise sanctuary for those who tire of the crowd. For a moment, you allow yourself to breathe. This is the calm before the storm, A fleeting pause when everything is as it should be. When the house stands poised, elegant, inviting. Soon, the sandals will echo at your gate, and with them will come the boasts, the arguments, the laughter, the occasional insult hurled like a javelin. But for now, the house belongs to you. The first knock sounds at the door. Not a timid tap, but a confident thump, the sort that says, "I arrive, and the evening begins with me." You smile grimly. The storm has arrived on cue. The door creaks open, and in strides the general, heavy-footed as though marching into battle rather than reclining into pleasure. His cloak is spotless, his bronze fibula polished to a gleam, but his sandals slam against the flagstones with the rhythm of a drill sergeant. He does not pause to admire the lamps, the curtains, the pool. No, he surveys the courtyard as though lining it up for inspection. Too few lamps on the north side, he declares at once, before even greeting you. The shadows are uneven. A man could be ambushed from there. You bite back a sigh. Ambushed? In a pleasure house? Unless one counts being surprised by a flute girl's laughter as a tactical maneuver. But you nod solemnly, wave to a servant, and within moments more lamps are fetched. Better humor him than endure another speech about Spartan discipline. The women glide forward, their laughter light, their hair gleaming with oil. They know this man's type. His pride lies in command, in having every eye on him. One leans close, complimenting the scar across his arm, asking which barbarian dared to leave such a mark. He puffs up instantly, launching into a tale of Thracian raiders, of narrow passes and desperate odds. Within 5 minutes, his audience is rapt, nodding, as though this courtyard itself were a battlefield. Yet his discipline wavers when the wine is poured. He frowns at the first cup, sniffing it suspiciously. "Watered," he mutters, "too watered." You murmur something about the wisdom of moderation, about the health of the body, but he waves it aside. "Nonsense," he declares. "Men fight harder when wine runs thick." He gestures for a stronger mix, and you comply. Better a tipsy general than a sulking one. As he reclines, he demands attention like a commander before his troops. One woman feeds him olives, slipping the pits discreetly into her palm. Another strums a lyre softly, timing her chords with the beats of his tail. He basks in it all, raising his voice until the fountain itself seems to splash in rhythm with his words. The fish scatter, as though even they fear being recruited into his army. But discipline creeps back in strange ways. He scolds one attendant for moving too slowly, insists the couches should be rearranged so that he may see every corner of the courtyard, and at one point attempts to teach a slave the proper way to march while balancing a tray of figs. You intervene quickly, reminding him that figs are better eaten than drilled, but he only chuckles and returns to his cup. The women roll their eyes when his back is turned, but they are clever enough to indulge him. They call him Strategos. They cheer at his every boast. They ask if Athens will soon conquer the world under his command. He beams, nodding gravely, though a streak of wine stains his beard. To him, this house is not a pleasure house, but a campaign, and tonight he marches victorious. You watch, keeping wine flowing, cushions plump, servants steady. Already you feel the tug of tension. One guest, and already the courtyard revolves around his ego. How will it survive when more arrive? You glance at the gate, knowing full well the evening's true campaign has only begun. By the time the general has worked through his second cup of unwatered wine and his fourth story of near-death heroics, the house has filled halfway with the usual tide of patrons. Merchants shuffle in, eager to forget the dust of the agora. So why is the usual patron's hand, and who knows the painters of the good side? A minor official arrives with a scroll tucked under his arm, swearing he only came for a quick cup, but already reclining, as though he will never leave. A poet, wide-eyed and underfed, slips through the door, clutching a verse he insists will be appreciated by someone here. Though you know well enough, the only appreciation he will receive is if he rhymes wine with divine. They scatter themselves across couches, laughing, gossiping, waving for wine. The women drift among them with practiced ease. One feeds a merchant cheese as though it were nectar. Another laughs too loudly at a poet's poor joke. Another lounges beside an official and whispers questions about laws he cannot even remember himself. The music rises, light and playful, plucked strings mingling with flute notes that curl like smoke. The courtyard glows now, torches flickering, linen curtains swaying, the fountains sparkling with scattered light. Half full, it hums like a beehive, steady, busy, alive, exactly the ambience you need before the heavyweights arrive. And then, the door thunders. Not a knock, not a tap, but a series of deliberate booms, as if Athens itself demanded entrance. The general sits up, squinting, muttering that only a fool would march so heavily without an army. You suppress a sigh. You know exactly who this is. The wealthy politician steps through, flanked by 2 guards in crested helmets, their spears angled like stage props more than weapons. Behind him drifts an entourage, 2 younger men with polished sandals and carefully curled beards, already muttering about policy, as though the assembly had relocated to your courtyard. And behind them, 2 women of his own household, dressed not in your house's silks, but in garments that make a point. We are above this, and yet here we are. He raises his hands as though to bless the courtyard. Ah, he proclaims, Athens' second assembly. The men chuckle dutifully, though the general scowls, muttering something about real assemblies involving fewer cushions and more discipline. You step forward, bowing slightly, offering him the choicest couch, positioned at just the right angle to see the fountain, the lamps, and, more importantly, every other man in the room. For a man like him do not come for wine or music. They come to be seen, admired, envied. The guards position themselves by the door, arms folded, expressions stony. The entourage sprawls, one demanding wine immediately, another already gesturing for a musician to play a hymn in honor of some new tax policy. You wave the musicians away before the mood can sour. Nothing empties a couch faster than a song about grain levies. The politician reclines, spreading himself like a general claiming new territory. One of his own women takes a place at his side, but he waves toward yours with a generous hand, declaring that the true flower of Athens blooms under your roof. The women smile sweetly, though one mutters behind her cup that flowers do not usually come with guards at the door. The general eyes him warily, his pride bristling. You feel the tension already. One man demands discipline, the other demands display. And between them lies you, the unfortunate keeper of lamps and wine, praying the 2 do not clash before the orator even staggers through the gate. The courtyard already hums with 2 sons competing for attention. The general, puffed up with discipline and scars, and the politician, draped in guards and flattery. Between them, the air feels taut, stretched like a bowstring. The musicians play softly, the women laugh loudly, and you pace quietly, balancing wine cups and egos in equal measure. And then comes the orator. At first, you hear him before you see him, a booming voice outside the gate, carrying across the street, declaiming some half-remembered verse from Homer. The words tumble out unevenly, like a trireme rowing with one oar too short. The gate swings open, and in he sways, cloak askew, sandals dusty, hair wild. His cheeks are flushed, his eyes bright, and the scent of another man's wine clings to him like incense after a sacrifice. My friends, he bellows, arms wide, nearly knocking over one of your attendants. At last, civilization. The party I left was full of dullards who thought moderation a virtue. Here, surely, we believe in excess. A cheer rises from the merchants and poets, already half drunk themselves. The general grunts, unimpressed, muttering that no true soldier respects a man who cannot walk straight. The politician, however, smiles thinly. He knows a drunken orator can be both useful and dangerous, like a torch in a storeroom. You step forward quickly, offering him a couch before he decides to mount the fountain and deliver a speech from its tiles. He accepts grandly, dropping onto the cushions with a sigh loud enough to echo. Your house, he says, pointing at you with wine-stained fingers, is the only true Pnyx in Athens. Here, Men speak freely, without censors, without laws, without sense. The women descend, laughing, plying him with olives and bread. He takes both, though he drops half the olives onto his cloak, declaring them a metaphor for democracy. Some are swallowed, some are lost, he proclaims, but all are part of the feast. The general snorts, muttering that metaphors win no battles. The politician raises an eyebrow, already calculating how best to use this flood of words. The orator launches into a tale of his earlier party, embellishing wildly. He claims to have convinced a flute girl to debate the meaning of justice, and that she won. He insists a rival orator attempted to outspeak him, only to collapse in tears after 3 cups. Each story grows taller, each gesture wider, until even the fountainfish seem to dart nervously at his voice. You keep the wine flowing, careful to dilute it heavily. A drunk orator is entertainment. A collapsed one is dead weight. The women play along, clapping at his jokes, asking sly questions, laughing at his slips. He beams, convinced he has conquered the evening, even as his cloak slides further down his shoulder and his words slur into song. The balance of the courtyard shifts. 3 egos now orbit one another, the general frowning at disorder, the politician measuring opportunities, the orator commanding laughter. And you, poor host, stand at the center, praying the walls hold, the lamps burn steady, and no one remembers to compare the acoustics of your courtyard with those of the Phoenix. By now, the courtyard is a storm, lamps flickering, wine flowing, voices overlapping in boasts and laughter. The general still lectures anyone within reach about battlefield courage. The politician has begun quizzing his entourage on tax figures between gulps of wine. And the orator, well, the orator has progressed from speeches to improvised songs about democracy and goats. You pray silently to every god you can name, but you know how these nights unfold. The courtyard is only the stage. The true business is conducted behind curtains. Slowly, one by one, desks peel away from the couches, signaling with raised brows or tossed coins. The linen veils you hung so carefully now sway with footsteps, swallowing pairs of silhouettes that vanish into shadow. Some vanish laughing, others with arms tight around waists, a few stumbling in ways that make you wonder if they'll even find the couch in time. Then come the side rooms with doors, their lamps trimmed low, their cushions piled high. Those are for men who insist they are too important to be observed, though everyone knows their absence is the loudest presence of all. The truly wealthy sometimes rent entire rooms for their entourage, as though conquering the house itself. You don't mind, their coins are just as heavy whether spent on poetry or pillows. You see the general rise first. He strides toward an alcove as though storming a fortress, one hand clasping a woman's wrist, the other still holding his wine cup. He growls that discipline is important in every arena, though he stumbles on the threshold, nearly toppling into the fountain. The women giggle, and he laughs too, pretending it was intentional, a tactical feint. The curtain sways shut behind him, leaving the fish in the fountain looking traumatized. The politician follows in grander style. He does not simply slip away. He parades, entourage in tow. His guards stand awkwardly at the curtain, while he sweeps inside with 2 women, one of his own, one of yours, chosen with theatrical flourish. He calls over his shoulder that negotiations require privacy, as though debating tribute rather than reclining on cushions. His attendants linger outside, muttering and adjusting their cloaks, trying to look important while waiting to be summoned. The orator, of course, takes longest to move. He insists on one more toast, one more joke, one more metaphor about olives, before finally being coaxed away. A woman loops her arm around his shoulder, half leading, half dragging him toward a side room. He calls out over his shoulder, "I go not for silence, but for the continuation of dialogue." The curtain falls, muffling his words, though you suspect he will still be heard in the courtyard before long. Around them, lesser patrons follow suit. A poet disappears with a giggle, clutching not only his partner, but also his scroll, swearing he'll recite verses between cups. A merchant counts coins twice before choosing the heavier curtain, declaring that nothing less will do after a profitable week. Even the minor official who swore he would only stay an hour vanishes, his scroll forgotten on the table. And you, left in the courtyard, survey the dwindling crowd. Musicians play softer now, their notes half drowning in laughter and muffled voices from behind curtains. Lamps flicker, casting long shadows that dance across the fountain. The air is thicker. Wine, sweat, incense, the faint sweetness of honey cakes long devoured. It is less the air of a feast, more the fog of indulgence. This is the part of the night you know best. The house becomes a hive, each chamber buzzing, each curtain trembling, and you, the harried beekeeper, making sure no one stings too loudly. You keep wine flowing, trays replenished, cushions refluffed. You collect coins discreetly left on tables, some neatly stacked, others tossed carelessly as though drachma grew on olive trees. The truth is, the great Athenian orgies are rarely elegant. They are messy, loud, unpredictable. Yet that is why they endure. For men who spend their days in law courts and assemblies, perfection is exhausting. What they seek here is chaos disguised as freedom. And you, somehow, must keep it all from collapsing into farce. Not all vanish behind curtains. Some, whether too proud to leave the stage or too enamored with the crowd, remain in the courtyard. And it is there, among lamps and cushions, that the night truly tips from feast into frenzy. The air grows thick with incense and laughter, wine sloshing from cups that are no longer carefully balanced, but waved like banners in victory. A merchant tips backward on his couch, roaring with laughter, as two women, one yours, one his own wife, feed him alternating grapes until he chokes and splutters, spraying juice across his tunic. His wife only laughs harder, declaring that Dionysus himself must be presiding, for her husband has never looked so ridiculous. The courtyard no longer resembles a banquet. Cushions lie scattered like battlefield spoils, lamps lean precariously in their brackets, and the fountain, once calm, now ripples with splashes as sandals and garments are tossed heedlessly aside. The feast has shifted, no longer plates and cups, but bodies pressed together in careless abandon. What began as laughter and music has blurred into something more primal. Men recline half-draped, their arms tangled with women. Some yours, some wives brought boldly by their husbands, all swept up in the same intoxication. Lining curtains hang forgotten, privacy abandoned in favor of spectacle. The music continues, but its rhythm is swallowed by gasps, shouts, and drunken songs, blending into a single chaotic chorus. The smell has changed too. Wine still perfumes the air, its sweetness heavy, but it mingles now with sweat, oil, and incense burnt low. The air is thick, humid, clinging to the skin. Somewhere, a tray of figs lies crushed into the floor, their syrup sticky beneath sandals that have long since been kicked aside. And then, through this storm, staggers the orator. He bursts from behind a curtain, cloak backwards, hair wild, his eyes lit with the gleam of a man already 3 cups cast wisdom. He clambers onto a couch as though mounting the speaker's platform on the pinnace. "Citizens," he roars, swaying dangerously, "behold the truest assembly, where laws are passed not by votes, but by embraces." He raises a half-empty amphora like a decree, sloshing wine across his sandals, and the courtyard erupts with laughter. A woman steals the vessel from him, drinks boldly, then pours the last drops over his head. He collapses in mock outrage, clutching at her arm, demanding that she defend herself with a speech of at least 50 lines. The crowd howls, some clapping, others too preoccupied with their own diversions to notice. From where you stand, half hidden in the shadows of a column, the scene feels less like a feast and more like a festival of Dionysus, messy, noisy, absurd. Some of the wealthiest men in Athens, stripped of dignity, reduced to laughter and heat, wrapped in the very chaos they spend their days pretending to govern. And you, ever the conductor, move quietly through it all, straightening lamps, refilling cups, collecting coins dropped carelessly onto tables. You sigh at the fountain. Its poor fish dart wildly as hands and feet splash into the water, but at least it masks the noise with its steady trickle. The night has tipped. What remains is not about food, or wine, or even conversation. It is the raw indulgence Athens whispers about in daylight, yet rushes toward in darkness. And here, in your house, you stage it night after night, pretending to manage what no man can truly control. The courtyard lies in ruins. Cushions are overturned, some on the floor, some half draped in the fountain. Cups roll underfoot, sticky with dregs of wine, their handles snapped like broken promises. Bread lies trampled, olives crushed, honey smeared across the flagstones where no servant dares step yet. The air is heavy, humid, thick with smoke and sweat, clinging like an unwelcome cloak. The orgy has ebbed. Where once there was laughter, song and cries, now there is only the occasional snore or hiccup. Men lie sprawled on couches, cloaks tangled around their legs, their heads lolling back. A woman snoozes with her cheek against a jug of wine, as though guarding it even in sleep. In one corner, a merchant and his wife curl together, murmuring faintly before drifting into silence. The orator remains the loudest, even unconscious. He lies atop a couch, arm flung wide, muttering fragments of speeches into the dark. "Citizens, citizens," he whispers, then snores so loudly the fountain fish scatter. You shake your head. No doubt tomorrow he will swear he delivered the finest speech of his career. The fountain is littered with evidence of the night. Sandals floating like wrecked ships, a cloak trailing damply, a jug half submerged. The fish dart nervously through it all, survivors of yet another evening of human chaos. Servants tiptoe through the wreckage, gathering what they can. Lamps are trimmed one by one, their flames dwindling until the courtyard falls into shadow. The soft scrape of brooms gathers pits and crumbs into piles, though they know it will take hours come morning to make this place respectable again. You stand in the center, surveying it all. This, you remind yourself, is victory. Not the neat victory of the assembly or the battlefield, but the messy victory of coins collected, reputations flattered, egos soothed. Tonight you've hosted generals, politicians, and orators, and not one left in anger. That alone is worth a libation. The last guest is guided out by two servants, his sandals mismatched, his words slurred. The door creaks shut, and at last the house is yours again. Quiet, save for the fountain's steady gurgle. Dim, save for one lamp flickering stubbornly against the wall. You extinguish it with a sigh, plunging the courtyard into dark. The linen curtains hang limp now, their secrets spent. The cushions lie in heaps, silent witnesses to yet another night of Athens at its most absurd. At last you retreat to your chamber. The straw mattress crunches beneath you, the smell of wine still clinging to your skin, incense still in your hair. You close your eyes, and for the first time all day, there are no knocks at the door, no boasts to flatter, no coins to count. Sleep takes you quickly, heavy and dreamless. Tomorrow, the house will demand it all again, but tonight, for a few short hours, the master of the pleasure house rests. And so ends our day in an Athenian pleasure house. You've seen the preparations, the arrivals, the indulgence, and finally, the exhaustion. Generals boasting, politicians parading, orators declaiming, all dissolving into the same tangle of laughter, wine, and scattered sandals. I hope by now you are already asleep. But if not, leave a like or suggest in the comments what time or place you'd like us to wander through next. Thank you for joining me tonight inside this house of Athens, where reputations loosened as easily as sandals. Rest well and good night.